Hi. So today I have a guest. My friend Andrew is here, and he is a paramedic. And so we're going to talk about medicine and being a paramedic and all those other sorts of things. So if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah. I'm a primary care paramedic in a medium city in Ontario. I've been working with my service for about 3 years now. And I'm guessing the question on everyone's mind is, so what's the pandemic been like?
That'd be the
Well,
question on my
some people
mind.
might be thinking about that.
That's definitely what I'm
Yeah.
thinking.
So depending on the phase that we've been in, feelings have been different. So obviously, right off the hop, starting with, news from China that a novel coronavirus may be spreading, and getting some of our early warning there was some obvious concern. Um, when we started developing cases in our community, it was stressful. So early pandemic, PPE shortages,
Yeah.
making a lot of tough decisions on conserving your personal protective equipment, when to use it, when not. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like a condom. At some point, you have to put it on and commit to it.
It's true. And also, you don't
Um,
know what the vector of transmission
but you could,
is.
yeah. So we weren't sure just how airborne it was versus droplets, stuff left on surfaces. We learned a lot from our first SARS outbreak, but didn't follow through on a lot of the lessons. So
Learning
we didn't have a
lessons.
lot
What
of
are the
PPE
lessons?
stockpiles. A lot of the PPE we had early on was of poor quality.
Oh.
Um, so it was stressful at first because we didn't know what we were walking into. Um, the one kind of upturn for us was early in the pandemic. Uh, our call volume dropped substantially.
Hmm.
So the one hospital here in town is packed most nights, especially on weekends. Lots of walk-ins and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, somebody walked in one night with a cough and said, "I think I have COVID-19," and
Yikes.
place was empty.
Yep,
Right?
that would do it.
Everyone said, "You know what? No, this can wait." Right? And yeah, very very frequently, even at our bases with higher base level staffing, like our downtown base can have 5 trucks stationed out of it at a time, but you're lucky if there's one or two there at any given time because
Yeah.
we're busy. And a lot of the time it's empty with a standby unit on its way to cover it from another part of the city.
Hmm.
Generally, everything gets kind of sucked into the core to provide coverage, right?
Yeah.
So the most densely populated areas get the most units standing by near them.
Sure.
Uh, Back in like April, May, you'd have 5 trucks sitting there. The tones would drop, and everyone would go, "Do you want us to do that? We'll jump on that."
Can I do
Right?
something?
Because
Just sitting there
we
bored all night.
got yeah, well, it went from go go go, never get your breaks, sometimes 6-hour offload delays where you're stuck in the back hall keeping an eye on a patient all night, to you're really quiet.
Hmm.
And part of that was there were some people who definitely should have called us who didn't, right? So
Yeah. Well,
there's the
I
people who give you the, "Oh, I've had chest pain for a couple days, but I want to see if it gets better." Well, like, the alternative to it getting better is it gets worse, and then you're
and
gonna
you
wish you called
die.
us earlier, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, people,
Yeah.
calling an ambulance is free. I will come to your house and assess you.
Yeah.
There is no charge.
Yeah.
If you really, really don't want to go to the hospital and it doesn't seem like there's anything really, really wrong, we do 2 seconds of paperwork called a refusal of service. I can leave. You can call me back anytime.
Mm-hmm.
That's free too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So if your chest hurts or you can't breathe, err on the side of caution. I'm
That's what
paid
it's
by
there
the
for.
hour.
Yeah.
All right? I'm not like, if you don't need to go to the hospital, I'm not going to twist your arm
Yeah.
and try to drag you there, right? But take your health seriously, right?
Yeah.
If you're feeling sick, please.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had a couple months where call volume really dropped off, and because we were in a lockdown, case numbers were really low. Like,
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
the summer, COVID was almost a non-factor in our area. We were still taking all the precautions, but we weren't seeing a lot of it. And then, of course, they sent the kids back to school.
Yeah. Well, and we thought the
Yeah,
first
there,
wave was bad, but the second wave, my
yeah,
goodness,
and there
pales
was
in
a lot of,
comparison.
yeah. It's like if you're trying to put out a fire, as you start to get control of it, you don't start tapering off the water,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, smother
Yeah,
it
just
and
just
smother it
be
once,
done.
right?
Get rid of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, the second wave is frankly more stressful than the first because we have more cases going on, more strain on the hospital system. People have lost their kind of fear of COVID.
Yeah.
The hospitals are now full again.
Yeah.
Our ICUs are filling up. So,
Well, and there was also a lot of like non-essential, like non-emergency care that was put off during the first wave that I
mhm.
think then got caught up on, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of
Yeah, we got a lot of
things.
people who didn't have access to their mental health services, a lot of people who were waiting on like a hip replacement kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Or who didn't have as much access to physiotherapy or rehab
Right.
as they might need to if they had a pre-existing injury. Um, so a lot of that had to be made up for and still has to be made up for, right?
Yeah.
Lots of elective surgeries are still off the slate, but I mean, you don't want to go in for an elective surgery, get COVID on the floor, and then
Hell no.
die,
Yeah.
right?
That
You
would
don't,
be.
like you might be previously healthy, you might be in the demographics that are relatively safe.
Yeah.
Adding
You just never know.
just went under the knife is a huge risk factor,
Yeah.
right? Like you're already prone to infections and you're already weak. So we've seen the provincial government kind of opening things faster than we're comfortable with.
Yeah.
I'm not an epidemiologist, but I know to take their advice seriously.
Yes.
Um, and we're seeing a lot of stuff like they're considering canceling March break. No, they should be considering possibly having a March break, right? Like the
Yeah.
default should, like going into Christmas, the default should have been Christmas ain't happening unless everyone's really good. But
Yeah.
instead it was, well,
Well,
get your shopping in.
maybe.
Something might be going on after
Make
Christmas,
sure
which
you
is again,
stimulate the economy before we
yeah,
do anything about this
yeah.
pandemic thing.
If there's a fire starting in your house, maybe put it out now
Yeah,
and
maybe.
don't intimate that you might start putting it out in a couple minutes,
Don't finish cooking before
right?
considering putting out the
To use the
fire.
same metaphor.
Yeah.
From the perspective of a healthcare provider, we were getting run into the ground before the pandemic.
Mm.
We got a bit of a break with the first wave because it was handled fairly well. And now we're getting run into the ground again.
Yikes.
I'm not going to name any facilities, but we've got nurses at hospitals who are contracting COVID. And instead of getting paid their 100% sick time, are getting something like 65% of their pay off WSIB until they're back to work.
Oh.
So they're just encouraging people to not want to get tested or report symptoms,
Right, right.
right?
And here we have an incentive for bad behavior,
Like
and so you end up with bad behavior. It's no surprise.
yeah, like you're like people are going to do what people are going to do if
Mhm.
you create that kind of environment, right? So you're not incentivizing good behavior in those people, and obviously you're kind of pissing them off,
Yeah.
right? Like
Oh, yeah.
people are getting thrown under the bus. We had a outbreak at a hospital here in town, and the media got wind of it, and they pretty much threw the staff under the bus.
Mm.
And then of course some of the senior executives were traveling out of country for
Of
vacations
course. Yeah, of course.
during stay-at-home orders, right?
Well,
So
this is an ongoing theme that it always ends up being the fault of individuals when it's systemic problems that are the actual cause.
yeah, are you familiar with the concept called elite panic?
Not directly, no.
Typically during disasters, the average person does okay.
Hmm.
During evacuations, people tend to help each other out. During fires, people tend to shelter each other. During natural disasters in the past, be it Hurricane Katrina, major earthquakes, major fires, typically the first thing people do is if they're not personally injured or in need of assistance is they start helping out their neighbors.
Hmm.
And that goes pretty well. But the people in charge of things and people in positions of authority or the people who have a lot of money and just want to go home tend to be the ones who freak out. They tend to be the ones who start trying to impose strict curfews and rationing so that people don't loot food from stores that's going to go bad in 2 days because the store is flooded. And they're typically the ones who are trying to, I'll pay any amount of money for the next plane ticket out of here. Okay, well, all these people are being evacuated to hospitals, so we don't have a spot. Any amount of money,
Right.
right? So
Even if the danger isn't
yeah.
necessarily warranting that level of panic.
Yeah, so I'm sure the bean counters are under a lot of pressure and definitely need that break in the Bahamas.
Yikes.
It erodes trust.
Yeah.
with the frontline workers at a Rhodes Trust, seeing senior decision makers or people in positions of authority giving us the "do as I say, not as I do" treatment.
Right.
There are reasons to do stuff like that, right? Like,
Sure.
there's if you have to, I don't know, if it's part of your job, like if you're an epidemiologist or you work in a lab and you need to collaborate with other people in your field,
Or even if it's
or
a
if
family
you're, I don't know, like,
emergency or something like that.
yeah,
Like
family
I can
emergency or something,
excuse
right?
that
Like
sort of thing.
there are cases for like compassionate entry into other countries and traveling and doing things safely and properly for a good reason. But
Yeah.
a vacation,
Yeah.
like we had the one politician in the premier's cabinet, I believe, who like queued up a bunch of fake Twitter posts to pretend he was still in the province. Like,
Yeah.
if you're doing that, you know it's wrong.
Yeah.
Even if like even if you can technically do it, like it's legal, there's no one stopping you, you're not going to go to jail. Like, you know you shouldn't be doing it. And
Not a
if your
good role
best
model.
defense is, well, you technically can't put me in prison for it, maybe you shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Right? It's like the old talk, like if your best defense for your beliefs or your arguments or what you're saying is, oh, freedom of speech, man. It's freedom of speech. That's it.
Yeah.
Like, it's
Freedom of
technically
speech
not
doesn't
illegal to say. That's your
make it
defense of your position.
free from consequence. It just makes it free to say those things or
Yeah,
free to do those things.
and it's not free from criticism either.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and
Yeah.
like having those exceptions in place, like I always feel that it's much more important to follow the spirit of the law, the spirit of a rule, than the letter of the law. Like my grandmother this
Absolutely.
summer, I guess in the fall, passed away from cancer. It was like really quick. Within a month, she went from perfectly healthy to dead. And so it was very nice to be able to have members of the family from the other side of the border were able to come over because they are Canadian citizens, and we made the exception. But we did it as well as we possibly could. Took the care to make sure that the risk was minimal. But
you should look at a rule and say, what are they trying to accomplish with this rule, right? Because again, if you're just finding a loophole, then you're not really diminishing risk, like the rule exists. Like back during the summer when you were allowed to have a gathering of like 10 people in your backyard or something, I'd have one or two friends over for a beer, and then I wouldn't see anyone for 2 weeks.
Right.
If you're gonna socialize, you keep a distance, but also like let that incubation period roll over. Make sure you're good before you see someone else.
It's the pragmatic thing to do.
That was that was another concern going into the pandemic. Was we knew pretty early on that people 20 to 30 are typically asymptomatic,
which
like
means
a good
doubly
half of cases.
A, you might be in the incubation period and not know that you're infected, and B, you might have a full-blown infection and not really know it.
Yeah, and that was it. And especially early on when we were low on PPE, I was just thinking, okay, so am I just the angel of death? Am I like Typhoid Mary? Am I gonna get it, be asymptomatic, walk through a nursing home, and just give it to a dozen people, and then either not be symptomatic and never know I had it, or be symptomatic several days later. So we're
and the fact that we had
we're
no
now
testing
masked
in those
up
early days
constantly.
or either. Like I'm 90% sure that I had it back in like March because I got sick in a way.
I remember you trying to get tested. You were looking,
and I just
you were asking.
couldn't get tested. My mother neither, who also had the same sort of thing. And like there's, given that both of us potentially had it and neither of us knew it, like we had to err on the side of extreme caution, and so little was known of the virus at that time that like I basically stayed in complete isolation for a month, and it was, well, it sucked, it was awful, but better safe than sorry.
The tiny saving grace of being a healthcare worker right now is at least I get to get out of my house once in a while. Right? Like my wife's working from home. So she gets up, she gets dressed, she goes into her office, she boots up her computer, makes a coffee, comes back, the computer's booted up, she's ready to go. She works all day, goes downstairs, eats lunch at the kitchen table, comes back up to her computer, and then at the end of the workday, she's
that's it.
Still physically at work.
That's one of the main things that
so I've been fortunate that
It's just this erosion of that work-life boundary, which had already been a huge
Mhm.
problem of the neoliberal age, but now it's so normified
Yeah.
that I don't think we'll be able to go back from this point.
Yeah, and like people do well with routine.
Yes.
Like even a bad routine, people at least do well having some structure.
Yep.
And now it's yeah, it feels like you're just to the
Yeah.
misses. I'm always at work, right?
Yep. Yep.
My structure is I'm always at my office.
That's no structure for anybody. You,
Yeah,
you never
and
feel
it's
like you're at
it's
rest. You never feel like you're at work.
yeah, yeah, and she's she finds herself working past 5 o'clock
Mm-hmm.
because whatever. What
Because
else
why
am I
not?
going to
I'm
do?
already
I'm
here.
already here, right?
It's not like
It
I've got a
just
party to
starts
go to or
blending
anything.
together. Yeah, and as she gets distracted in the afternoon or something, right? She goes down to make a cup of coffee and thinks, "Oh, I'm gonna clean some dishes or something too, right?" And she thinks to herself, "Well, I'll just make it up later. It's not like I have to stay
Sure.
at the office." So yeah, there's those lines blending more and more, right?
Yeah. So what about healthcare in general? How do you feel like the situation is in terms of healthcare in our province of Ontario?
uh,
A telling sign.
Languishing under decades of neoliberal austerity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just in a lot of places, funding is not where we need it.
Hmm.
When it is available, it doesn't necessarily get allocated appropriately.
Hmm.
I was having a similar discussion this past summer when it came to talking about things like defund the police, talking
Hmm.
about, well, what do you do with the police budget if you're not going to use it? And I always go back to the fire department. The fire department is a victim of their own success. They're fighting fewer and fewer structure fires because of things like proper building code
Hmm.
and installation of fire doors and construction materials that are less flammable,
Hmm.
and interior fire suppression systems and modern smoke alarms that give you early detection. We're just losing fewer buildings to fire now than we like. Look back in the history books or punch into Google just Great Fire of blank and see how many major cities in the past have had a fire big enough to call it a great fire because it
Yep.
took out
Yeah.
a third of the city. It rendered thousands of people homeless, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, healthcare could be approached the same way, right? So we have some good pilot projects. My paramedic service has a community paramedicine program that's been running for a few years now, and they're constantly branching and looking for more proactive ways to address healthcare needs.
Hmm.
So they're doing things like remote patient monitoring of people who have chronic conditions. So, before your COPD exacerbation gets you to the point where you need to be hospitalized, let's try and catch it and address it before it, like if you're just going to be a bean counter and if you want to take the human element right out, let's catch it before it turns into a $200,000 hospital bill.
Right.
But
Right.
also, let's make it so you don't necessarily die,
That would be lovely.
right? Like,
Let's improve the
right?
general
So
health of our society. Wouldn't that
it's
be great?
almost like we can save money and make people happier and healthier, which
Huh.
is just
Go
a
figure.
novel concept, right? We've been tired and we've been run off our butts for years.
Yeah.
The hospitals are chronically running over 100% capacity, right? So
Yeah.
um, you're supposed to be running at something like 70, 80% capacity so that if there's a major influx or there's a motor vehicle collision or a crane falls over, you got extra space. Or if there's, say, a pandemic, you suddenly got so
Yeah.
much buffer room.
Having a
And
little.
yeah, we've been running at 105 to 110% capacity consistently for long stretches of time before this pandemic even
Yeah.
happened. So
Based on my observations as an outsider, it just seems like there's just too much stuff being funneled through the same path. Where
mhm.
if you wander into an emergency room with, say, a split open chin after doing something stupid on a bicycle in the middle of the night, possibly under the influence of some drugs, asking for a friend. Um,
Yeah.
but like I had to sit there and wait for a doctor to come and assess me when it could have just been some nurse practitioner or just somebody who's skilled with the suture. Just zip zip zip, you're done.
Mhm.
It would have taken like 20 minutes at the most, but it had to go through this whole procedural aspect that was pretty well unnecessary given the scenario that I was in there.
Yeah, there are a few you might want to call them like bureaucratic hurdles
Mm.
involved in our system. There's a there's one physician here in town who does something I really like, where he just like hangs out with the triage nurse and
Oh,
just tries to like rapid fire take care of things that don't need a lot of intensive time and care, right?
That's
Like
brilliant.
if you come into the waiting room and you walk up to the clerk and you're drenched with sweat, white as a sheet, and you say, I have a crushing pain in my chest, you're going right in. It sounds like a
Yeah,
heart
yeah.
attack, right?
Let's get
But
that.
there's a whole bunch of like flu-like symptoms. Oh, I've been throwing up and I can't really keep stuff down. Yeah. I just need a couple sutures here. Oh, I don't know if this laceration needs sutures, but because I don't know, and because
Yeah.
telehealth can't tell me over the phone, I got to come in, right?
Right.
This physician will go, you need to hydrate, mix apple juice and water, 50-50, dip it slowly, take some Gravol, get out of here kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, you're
You're
fine, you're
fine. Get the
good.
hell out.
Let's not have you waiting any longer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that suture, that does not need sutured. Let's flush that out. Let's throw a bandage on it. Let's give you some extra gauze, change this for tomorrow, come back all funny, right? And it's just like, yeah, let's get through a bunch of this quick, get the waiting room empty and just get these people home.
Yep.
But there's also stuff like people go to the emergency room for just all kinds of things.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, have you talked to your family doctor?
Yeah.
No. Have you just gone to Shoppers Drug Mart and bought Tylenol? No. Like, have you tried anything? There's almost, it transcends class, gender, race, age. Everyone does this. Just there's some people out there who just don't cope well.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah.
There's lots of times where we get called. It's just like, oh, I threw up. Okay. Anything hurt? No. You've been throwing up a lot? No, just the once.
Do you need me to
you feel
hold your
better
hair?
now that you've thrown up? Oh, I feel a lot better now that I've thrown up. Yeah. And it's just like, okay. So, like, I got to ask, do you want to go to the hospital? And they're like, what do you think? And I'm like, honestly, do you have any Gravol in your house? Can you take some? Can you see if you can keep it down? Right? Or like I rolled my ankle 2 weeks ago, but now it's still kind of stiff. Okay, well, if it was broken, you wouldn't have been walking on it for 2 weeks. Have you talked to your family doctor? Right? Like a whole bunch of people, they have this like, well, I can order a pizza to my house. So it stands to reason I can get this mole on my back checked out. I'm actually not a dermatologist. I can't tell you if that's cancer. But being that it's been there for 10 years and hasn't changed at all,
it's a fairly good guess, yeah. When I was at the emergency room in the aforementioned, my friend was in the emergency room for that aforementioned issue. There was a man there who I got the sense was a regular at said emergency room, where he, quote unquote, needed a medication adjustment and had a litany of symptoms. And while I was sitting there in the waiting room, he was telling me his life story over and over again. Just like, okay, we need some psych work on this guy, and this is not the right place for him, but this is the only place that he knows to go because he's lonely and he's bored and he just needs stimulation.
It's open 24/7. It's got climate control. It's not wet. So for some people, it's the shining beacon on a hill where you can get some shelter, right? So there's definitely people who are there because they're comfortable there. It's the place they've gone to before for help. It's not the place for dealing with a chronic issue. A lot of the time they get there, they sit in the waiting room half an hour, and then they wander off because they've forgotten why they came there. And part of it is some of them do have legitimate medical concerns, but they're living in circumstances where they're difficult to manage. And so they're having, not a relapse, but recurrent issues. That frostbite's not going to get better if you keep sleeping outside. Right. So lots of social issues that end up being foisted onto our hospital system. And a lot of people, they give you the gears with I see you guys down at the men's mission a lot. Those guys don't pay taxes. They're wasting a lot of resources. And I'm like, they're not really. Like, again, I'm paid by the hour. I roll up out front. They walk out to my ambulance to meet me. I open the side door. They hop in. We chat for a minute. I get some vitals. That's free. I'm already getting paid by the hour. I was driving by anyway. We're not using that much gas. The hospital's a kilometer away.
Deal with the issue and away you go.
It's not like we're just doling out like hip replacements for these guys, right? Like the resources being used are resources which are temporarily tied up. And it can be kind of frustrating on a really, really busy night where like you're hearing on the radio very serious things happening and you're thinking to yourself, man, we're closest to that, but I got to deal with this guy right now. But as a general rule, most of them are like a few of them are like neo-Nazis and stuff, and I don't care for them, but I
Yeah.
keep it to myself. But
Yeah.
as a general rule, they're pleasant.
Mhm.
They are in really crappy circumstances,
Well, the
and
main
it
thing is,
doesn't take a lot of effort for me to make. Yeah,
yeah, they're human beings. They're human
yeah,
beings that deserve the same
yeah.
level of care as everybody else. So
Even if your complaint is I'm cold and hungry, well,
yeah,
yeah, that's I can kind of address that. I can get you
yeah,
a warm blanket and bug the triage nurse for a sandwich. Like
and sure
I'm
there
not gonna let
are,
you starve to death. But unfortunately, hospital food, your options are like, do you
yeah,
like your turkey sandwich dry or ultra
hmm
dry?
and there are certainly better ways that we could be dealing with those problems,
Mhm.
even in an acute form. But like,
Yeah,
at least this is something that you can do for people that are in a chronic situation.
yeah, and I see a lot of our people chronically struggling from like mental illness, housing issues, addiction. A lot of their problems aren't like inherently medical, like
Yeah.
they're social issues. And
Yeah.
like part of the problem is like, I'm going to sound like a raging anarchist, but in our atomized society, broken down into nuclear units,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people just don't do well in that kind of environment,
Yep.
right? Like the old saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, like humans still need that kind of social interaction, and like a family unit's great because like when I'm working, my wife can cook and do dishes. And on my days off, I can handle some of the chores, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can expand this concept, right? A lot of these people, they need just support,
Yeah.
someone to talk to.
Community.
They're lonely. Boy, wouldn't it be great if they just had those people to support them? But you
Wouldn't it?
can't just lump a whole bunch of sick people together like down at a homeless shelter and be like, hey, all of you people who
Best
are
of
under
luck.
tremendous amounts of stress,
Yeah.
who are not well fed, not well rested, who are chronically sleep deprived, who are either withdrawing from something or on something, you guys will level each other out.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, yeah, no,
You
it's
just watch
no,
all the anger bouncing around. Like I was actually just
yeah,
downtown earlier this evening, and it's just there's just so much rage that's just
mhm.
bubbling under the
Yeah,
surface, and
yeah. It's indignation.
yeah,
It's people know they're not getting a fair shake,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
I talk to people all the time, and their complaint is like, just my life is fucked,
yeah.
right? Like I talk to people and I'm like, what's going on? And they're just like, they're mad, they're agitated,
Hmm.
they're throwing shit around, and they're like my life is terrible.
Yeah.
And I'm
There's
like, can
nothing
I
in the
help?
world
And
that
they're like,
can solve it.
no,
Yeah.
right? And then like Ministry of Health mandates that I gotta say, can I take you to the hospital? And they go, that's not going to fix anything.
Right.
I'm hooked on meth and I don't want to be. I don't
Yeah.
have anywhere to live.
Yeah.
It's winter.
There's no
I'm
social
freezing.
supports.
I'm hungry. And I'm like, I can offer you a blanket, man.
Yeah.
Here, take a blanket, right?
Yeah.
Like, I feel for you. You fell through the cracks.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you could turn your life around if we just helped you.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
and it's not like if we stuffed you in a suit and sent you to McDonald's and tried to get you a job flipping burgers, we could help you. I mean, like if you didn't have the pressure of just having to survive for a
Yes.
couple months,
Yes.
right? If you weren't working on the very fucking bottom of Maslow's pyramid
Hmm.
every day, just
Yeah.
scraping by, uh, you could dig yourself out of the hole. But you put so much effort into just keeping going,
Yeah.
into just finding somewhere safe to sleep, finding something to eat, finding a bed at a shelter, coping with either mental health or addiction issues or both. And a lot of these people, they also have healthcare issues,
Yeah.
right? There's lots of people don't get hooked on opioids because it's a party drug,
Oh.
right? People
Oh
with
no. It's
chronic injuries get hooked on opioids.
yeah.
People who have a crushed vertebrae in their back that's inoperable get hooked on opioids.
Or for that matter,
Um,
like mental anguish is aided by
yeah,
opiates as well. So
yeah, people start using drugs on the street because
mhm.
holy shit, man, it is terrible to live on the street and you
Yeah,
need to
yeah,
take the edge off. Like
that's
I
long and
come home
short of
from work and have a beer after a rough day because chemically I'm like, you know what?
it.
I want to lower my cortisol
How
levels. I'm
let's
stressed out.
yeah.
I've had a rough one. I'm going to drink some of that poison that makes you feel better. All right?
Sounds great.
Makes you feel different from how you usually. Yeah, it takes the edge. It takes the rough edges off the world.
Yeah.
So you can imagine the desire to take the rough edges off the world when you're sleeping on cold concrete in the snow,
The world
right?
is all edges in that scenario.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of ways out for these people that are easy to access for them. And I don't
Yes.
mean that in like just in like a bureaucratic sense, but like even going to like a shelter, there's structure and rules that are kind of difficult to follow when you're in that kind of position.
Yep.
Right? Like if you're coming down off something and you're sleep deprived and you're hungry, following the rules or like doing things at other people's pace, it's challenging, and it's really easy to find yourself getting kicked out or back on the street, or just saying, fuck it, I don't want to put up with the system, or I can't sleep in that room with that other guy.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
it's a disciplinary apparatus, and if disciplinarian attitudes aren't going to solve the problem that you're having, which most of these problems are not solved in that way, then it's basically just torture.
And you're between a rock and a hard place, because the people who the people who are running the men's mission and the Salvation Army here in town, they're better people than me. Just like deep down at their core, they're going to heaven. I'm not. Like they have so much patience, and they put up with so much like abuse and stuff. Because again, unhappy people, they lash out, right? So like you really get caught in between a rock and a hard place, trying to meet people's needs while also like being human yourself, right? One of the things that my reading and my experience talking to people has shown me is that sleep deprivation is a huge factor in mental health issues with the residentially impaired.
Yeah.
Sure, you can go to a shelter where it's, you're not going to get rained on, and you're not going to have the cops come and tell you to move on, and you're not going to have someone try and steal your crap, possibly. But is it too cold? Is it stiflingly hot? Is there light coming in through the window at odd hours? Is it loud?
Snoring?
Is there someone else having their own mental health issue in the room next to you being particularly loud, right? And I've looked into shelters that have worked on like giving people individual sleeping places with like control over when it's light and when it's dark, so you can get your own circadian rhythm back, and keeping out noise pollution and having like good insulation. And people do a lot better.
Surprise.
They do way better because you're not running on I don't know, the fumes of your neurotransmitters.
Yeah.
It's rough. And a lot of people out there with substance abuse, like they start using meth for one of two reasons I've found from like talking to people on the street. One is if they are addicted to opioids, which is our slow burn pandemic.
Yeah.
Started a long time ago, and it's going to keep going long past coronavirus. People need to function, right? That baseline. I need to find food. I need to find shelter. I need to do stuff. People who are using opioids are still doing stuff. In fact, most opioid addicts are still out there holding down jobs and doing stuff. Like they're just getting through their life while also
the only reason why
addicted
they are
to opioids.
Holding it down.
Right. Yeah, so that's the thing. It's getting them through the day, because again, if you got that chronic injury, but you still need to drag yourself out of bed and get to work, then you're going to pop opioids, and that problem gets worse and worse and worse. People on the street can't find safe places to sleep. Got to keep themselves moving. They start mixing opioids with meth because one's an up or one's a downer, right? They want to combat that. Well, they know that if they fall asleep here, someone's going to steal their crap, or they know that if they fall asleep in this weather, they're going to get frostbite and lose some of their fingers or toes, right? So they're mixing meth with opioids to remain functional, right? And then the other one is just people who straight up they're using meth because they've learned to survive by sleeping 1 in 3 days. They'll be up for 2 days. Yeah, when you see people in the downtown core who are acting loopy and who are not walking a straight line and who are speaking sentence fragments and they're all over the place and they're talking to people who aren't there, that's methamphetamine induced being awake for 2 days straight.
Yeah,
right. Where it's not even the meth at that point; it's the sleep deprivation. But you just physically can't. Your brain can't turn off.
Yeah, I tried once to see how long I could stay up without sleeping, and I think I made it to about 50 hours, and at that point I was just like, I was coming apart at the seams. Like there was no way
you feel like your house is unfolding itself around you, and you start hearing voices that aren't there because you're starting to dream. And there's geese all over my room. What the fuck's going on? Oh, the geese are gone now. What's happening? Those very brief dreams that you have as you're falling asleep some nights, they just start happening while
they're
you're
just
awake.
in the room with you. And
Yeah,
There's no
right.
way to
So
know what is
it's
what.
what that person needs is a job,
Yeah, sure, a job, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, get them some training so that they can become a welder or something like that. That's
yeah,
gonna
absolutely.
definitely solve that problem. So yeah, thanks for joining me, Andrew, and
Yeah, man, anytime.
yeah, and for you at home, I do these videos daily, and so if you like this content, definitely feel free to like the video and share and subscribe and all those algorithmic things. And if you want to talk about something interesting on this show here, let me know. I'd be happy to hear from you, and I'd be happy to make your acquaintance. So thanks for watching, and see you tomorrow.